The wind tore across the Wyoming plains with the force of a world trying to shake itself awake, driving needles of icy snow across the empty fields. Lily Parker pulled her thin gray coat tight against her body, but the cold slid through the worn fabric as if it were not there at all. 23 years old, jobless, hungry, and alone, she trudged forward with a battered backpack hanging off one shoulder, every breath a white cloud trembling in the storm. Ahead, the sky darkened into a wall of swirling gray, a warning that the night would not go easy on strays. Her boots slipped on the frozen ground as she pressed on, heart thudding under the weight of the truth she had tried to outrun. She had no home waiting, no family watching the clock, no warm light to guide her. Only a distant glimmer on the horizon remained, a faint golden dot in a sea of white, calling to her like the last hope of a woman on the edge of the world. The girl in the Wyoming blizzard, winter swallowed the outskirts of Cody, Wyoming, in a curtain of white, so raced across the open fields like restless ghosts chasing one another. The wind howled low and steady, as if warning any traveler foolish enough to stay outside. In that endless white, a lone figure pushed forward, her boots sinking with every uncertain step. Lily Parker, 23, thin from skipped meals and sleepless nights, staggered along the frozen roadside. Her long, dark brown hair was plastered to her cheeks by melting flakes, and her pale skin carried the dull blue of cold creeping too deep. She had once been described as soft-spoken, bright, quick to help, but nothing soft remained in her tonight. Hunger had carved lines onto her delicate face. Fear and exhaustion had stolen the sparkle from her hazel eyes. 3 days earlier, she had been a hotel waitress in Denver, the kind who remembered regular customers by name and smiled even on the worst shifts. But everything collapsed the moment she reported her manager for harassment. The man, broad-shouldered and vindictive, used his influence to twist the story. Lily found herself stripped of her job, her paycheck withheld, and her reputation shattered. She packed her few belongings into a worn backpack and boarded a bus heading north, driven by the faint hope that a smaller town might offer safer ground. That hope had thinned just like her breath. The bus was forced to stop at a rural gas station when the highway iced over. Lily, believing the nearest town was only a short walk away, stepped into the storm. She had always been stubborn, always believed she could push through as long as she kept moving. But the storm was stronger. Hours passed. The snow thickened. Her legs cramped, her vision blurred. Her stomach clawed at her from the inside. She wiped at her eyes, but the wind slapped her hand away. She felt as if the sky itself was pushing her backward. Just when she feared she was walking in circles, a soft glow flickered in the far distance. A warm, golden square of light cutting through the blizzard. A house. A real house. She whispered something between a prayer and a sob before forcing her numb legs toward it. The walk felt endless. The wind shoved at her like an angry hand, and her body shivered so violently she feared her bones would crack. But the light grew larger, steadier, warmer. A wooden porch appeared like a miracle rising out of the white. She dragged herself up the steps. Her numb fingers curled into a weak fist, and she lifted her hand toward the door, but her arm trembled and fell. She tried again. Nothing obeyed her anymore. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. The edges of her vision pulsed black. Inside that very house lived a man she had never met. Ethan Cole, a former Navy SEAL in his early 40s. He was tall, with the solid build of someone forged by years under heavy gear. His face, angular and defined, bore faint scars along his cheek and jawline, souvenirs from missions he never spoke about. His black and silver stubble matched the seriousness in his deep-set blue eyes. That seriousness had grown sharper since the injury to his left leg, an explosion that had hurled him into months of recovery and left him with a permanent limp. Ethan lived quietly now, tending a modest ranch for the sake of his elderly mother and his own need for silence. He was the kind of man who preferred repairing a fence to making conversation, who trusted duty more than people, and who hid kindness beneath layers of caution, learned the hard way. His closest companion was Atlas, a 5-year-old German shepherd with powerful shoulders, intelligent amber eyes, and a disciplined stance. Atlas wore a service harness marked "Service Dog, Do Not Pet." He had trained beside Ethan since the day Ethan returned home injured. The dog understood pain. He understood vigilance. And he understood the subtle shifts in danger before a human did. Tonight, Atlas lay near the fireplace, head resting on his paws, ears flicking at the storm's distant roar. On the porch, Lily's knees buckled. Her body sank toward the wooden boards, her breath thin, her thoughts slipping away. She tried to call out, but her voice cracked in her throat. The porch spun. The world dimmed. Snowflakes clung to her eyelashes like tiny shards of ice. Inside, Atlas lifted his head. His ears pricked. His body stiffened. Then he barked once, a low, alert sound. Not frantic, not confused, but a deliberate signal, the kind that carried meaning learned from years of training. Lily collapsed fully, her cheek meeting the cold wood, her limbs limp, the final thread of warmth fleeing her body. The golden glow from inside the house spilled faintly across the porch. But whether Ethan had heard that single sharp bark, or whether he would reach her in time, remained unknown. The chapter closed with only the wind, the snow, and Atlas's voice breaking the silence. The soldier and the stranger, the storm pressed against the windows like a living thing, rattling the glass in long, uneven breaths. Inside the small kitchen, Ethan Cole stood near the counter, his weight shifted off his injured left leg. The warm light from a hanging bulb cast gentle shadows across his angular face. His black and silver stubble caught the glow, giving him the look of a man carved from stone and softened only by quiet endurance. He stirred a pot of coffee, though he had long stopped tasting anything he drank. It was habit, not pleasure. Routine kept him steady. Routine kept the memories at bay. He reached for a mug, but a sharp sting shot through his knee. He inhaled sharply, trying not to curse. The cold worsened his old injury, and tonight the storm clawed at it like an old enemy returning for unfinished business. Then Atlas barked, one clear, purposeful bark, not playful, not uncertain, a signal. Ethan set the mug down so quickly it rattled. He hobbled toward the door, grabbing the edge of the counter for balance. Atlas was already standing, tail straight, ears forward, amber eyes locked on the entrance. The dog's entire posture shouted urgency. Ethan pulled the door open. The wind punched into him. Snow blew in like dust from another world, but all he saw was the girl. She lay curled on the porch, half buried under the new layer of snow, her dark hair stiff with frost, her lips the bruised purple of deep cold. Her backpack lay a few inches away, sagging and soaked. Ethan's heart tightened, a reflex older than reason. Without hesitation, he leaned down, slipping his arms beneath her. She was feather-light, frighteningly cold. Her head lolled against his chest, her breath a fragile whisper against his jacket. "Atlas, inside," he said, voice low but steady. He carried her into the living room and laid her on the rug near the stone fireplace. Atlas stayed close, pacing in a guarded arc around her, reading every shift in her breathing. Ethan knelt beside her, pulling off her frozen boots, peeling away wet socks. He fetched a quilt from the sofa, a thick handmade one stitched by his mother decades ago, and wrapped it around the girl. Her eyelashes glistened with ice. Her fingers were curled inward in the first signs of dangerous cold. He brought a cup of warm water and lifted her head gently. "Hey, stay with me?" His voice was steady, but inside he felt a stir of fear he hadn't known since the battlefield. Fear of losing someone he'd barely met. Fear of not being fast enough. Fear of failing again. When she didn't respond, he cupped her cheek with his calloused hand, willing warmth into her skin. Minutes passed. Finally, her eyelids twitched. She coughed, a ragged scraping sound, and inhaled sharply as if the air burned. Her eyes cracked open, hazel and full of confusion. She jerked back instinctively, panic flashing across her face. "It's all right," Ethan said softly, palms raised in a gesture of peace. "You're safe. You collapsed on my porch." Atlas stepped forward, sniffing her cheek. His large frame, broad chest, powerful legs, thick winter coat, made him look almost intimidating, but his eyes held a deeply intelligent gentleness. Lily blinked at him, startled yet oddly comforted. "My name is Ethan," he added. "That's Atlas." She tried to sit up but winced when her stiff limbs protested. Ethan helped steady her. Her voice came out hoarse. I'm Lily. Lily Parker." Her throat tightened. For a second her guard faltered, and the exhaustion behind her eyes surfaced like a wound. Ethan nodded once, acknowledging without prying. He had the kind of presence that gave people space to speak or stay silent as they wished. It was a rare gift learned through years of watching men break under pressure. He knew the signs of someone carrying too much. He brought her a blanket-wrapped hot pack from the small cabinet near the fire. She held it to her chest with trembling hands. "Eat this," he said, placing a bowl of instant soup near her. He wasn't much of a cook, but it was warm and salty. and she devoured it like someone who hadn't eaten in far too long. After a few minutes, her breathing slowed, steadied. Then she spoke, haltingly at first, then with quiet urgency, as if once the door cracked open, everything threatened to spill out. She told him about Denver, about the manager, about the lies, about losing her job, her pay, her dignity, about stepping off a bus because she believed she could make it on foot. Ethan listened without interrupting. His jaw clenched when she described the man who had cornered her at work, the way the system twisted her honesty against her. Ethan despised bullies. Too many good people had been crushed by them. He looked at her hands, chapped, cracked from cold, looked at the way she held herself small, as if bracing for another blow. She didn't need to convince him she wasn't lying. He had seen the world. He recognized truth when it trembled in front of him. "You can stay here," he said finally, "for now." Lily's eyes widened. I don't want charity. It's not charity." His tone was firm, not unkind. "I need help around the house. My mother's health is failing. Cooking, organizing, making sure she takes her medicine. You help with that. You stay warm and fed. Fair trade." Lily looked toward the hallway, where faint light glowed from a bedroom door. She swallowed, thinking of the storm waiting outside, thinking of the road that had almost killed her. Her pride fought with her fear. But survival won. She nodded slowly. "All right, I'll stay." Ethan simply answered, "Good." Atlas sat beside them, tail sweeping the floor once, as if sealing the agreement. The chapter closed with Lily realizing she had stepped not just into shelter, but into a life she never expected. Shadows on the snowfield, morning came slowly to the ranch, rising not as a beam of light, but as a pale wash of gray behind the storm clouds. Snow still clung to the fences and roof lines, but the wind had softened, leaving the world muted and strangely peaceful. Inside, the house smelled faintly of coffee and oatmeal, the modest comforts of a new routine taking shape. Lily Parker moved quietly through the kitchen, adjusting the wool scarf around her neck as she stirred a pot on the stove. Her cheeks had regained some color since the night she collapsed on the porch, though her eyes still carried the cautious watchfulness of someone learning to trust the ground beneath her feet again. She set out a bowl for Margaret Cole, whose slow footsteps approached from the hallway. Margaret, in her early 70s, was a slight woman with silver hair that curled loosely around a face softened by age. Her skin had the translucence of someone whose health had long been fragile, and her pale blue eyes drifted in and out of focus depending on the day. Yet beneath the frailty, there was a gentle dignity. She moved with care, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the table. "Good morning, dear," Margaret murmured, her voice thin but warm. Lily helped guide her to a chair. "Morning, Mrs. Cole. I made oatmeal the way you like it, with cinnamon." Margaret smiled faintly and rested her hand atop Lily's for a moment. It was light, almost weightless, like she feared her touch might burden others. Ethan had told Lily that his mother had once been a strong woman, sharp-witted, fiercely kind, but years of heart medication and the slow creep of memory loss had dimmed her spark. Still, Lily saw flickers of it sometimes, like now, when Margaret's features brightened, for no reason other than simple gratitude. Ethan stepped into the kitchen next, tall enough that he had to duck under one of the wooden beams overhead. He wore a thick flannel shirt beneath a winter vest, his dark hair slightly mussed from feeding the cattle. The crisp air had reddened his cheeks, but his expression defaulted to that stoic calm Lily was beginning to read more clearly. Beneath the composure, there was always a careful vigilance, as if his mind never quite settled. Atlas followed him closely, the German shepherd's paws silent against the wooden floor. His coat glistened in the warm light, and his ears swiveled subtly with every shift in the room. He lay down near the fireplace, crossing his front paws and watching the kitchen with the alert patience of a seasoned guardian. After breakfast, Lily slipped into a thicker coat and stepped outside with a basket of laundry. The cold air bit at her nose, but she welcomed it. The rhythm of chores grounded her. It gave her purpose, something she hadn't felt in a long while. She walked with Atlas toward the small barn. The dog stayed near her side, occasionally glancing upward as if checking her pace. Lily found herself talking to him without realizing it, soft, half-formed sentences about nothing in particular. Atlas listened with calm acceptance, and somehow that made the openness easier. When they reached the barn, Lily spotted something that made her pause. A truck, a dark-colored pickup parked far off near the tree line, engine off, windows tinted. It looked abandoned at first, but after a moment she saw the faintest shift inside, a silhouette leaning forward, watching. Her heartbeat stumbled. Atlas sensed it too. His ears shot up, tail stiffening, body angling toward the truck. A low growl rolled from his chest, not loud, not threatening, but unmistakably alert. Lily swallowed hard. Ethan didn't mention expecting anyone. The wind carried no answer, only the distant creak of the ranch's weather vane turning. She stepped back instinctively. The memory of Denver, of that office, of her manager's hand gripping her wrist, flashed through her mind like a spark catching dry wood. Her throat tightened, breath shortening. For a moment, she wanted to run back into the house, but she forced herself to breathe slowly. She wasn't that helpless girl anymore, not here. Still, the unease burrowed deep. Inside the house later, Ethan noticed her troubled silence. His brow furrowed as he scratched Atlas behind the ear, the subtle gesture grounding him whenever tension rose. "You all right?" he asked. Lily hesitated, lips pressed together. There was a truck near the far fence line. Someone inside. They were watching the ranch. Ethan stood straighter. The shift in him was instant. Shoulders firming, eyes narrowing with a soldier's focus. The soft edge of domestic routine fell away, replaced by the quiet readiness of a man who had seen danger take many forms. "Describe it," he said. She did, every detail she could recall. Ethan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he exhaled slowly, as though confirming something he already feared. He reached for his phone, scrolling to a familiar number. "Someone I know in Denver just called last night," he said quietly. "Your old manager is looking for you. He's asking questions in the wrong places. He's not doing it alone." Lily felt her stomach drop. He wouldn't." "He would," Ethan said firmly. "Men like that don't let go. They send others to do what they won't risk themselves." The phone rang. A man's voice answered, brief, serious. Ethan spoke in low tones, asking for updates, names, movement. Lily couldn't hear the details, but she saw the tension forming at the corner of his jaw. When he hung up, he slipped the phone into his vest. "You're not going anywhere alone," he said. Not an order, but not a request either. Lily nodded, the heaviness in her chest growing. That evening, after finishing the chores, she stepped out onto the porch while Ethan tended the firewood. Atlas trotted after her, settling beside her feet like a silent sentinel. The sky was a dark ocean, heavy with clouds that caught the glow from the distant town. Snow drifted lazily now, falling in soft spirals rather than violent waves. The ranch lights cast warm halos on the ground, and Atlas's fur shimmered gold where the light touched him. Lily hugged her coat tighter. Far off, near the horizon, she saw it again. A dark truck, a faint shape, waiting. Her breath caught. Atlas pressed against her leg, letting out a quiet warning rumble, low and certain. Chapter 3. Closed with Lily standing on the porch, snow gathering at her boots, her gaze locked on the distant shadow. The world around her was silent, but danger was no longer a memory. It had found her footprints in the snow. The night the wind roared, the second blizzard arrived like a beast awakened, its voice shaking the thin walls of the ranch long before the sky turned black. By late afternoon, clouds swallowed the last trace of daylight, leaving the land wrapped in a heavy, bruised darkness. The wind slammed fist after fist against the windows, rattling them in their frames. Snow streaked across the glass in furious swirls, each gust carrying the sharp hiss of ice grains, scraping like claws. Inside, Ethan Cole moved with brisk efficiency, his limp more pronounced as the cold tightened around his injured leg. He checked the fuel lines to the generator, tightened each bolt on the barn doors, and stacked firewood beneath the sheltered awning. The sharp lines of his face hardened with concentration. Storms never unnerved him. They were predictable compared to the chaos he once knew, but the possibility of danger hiding behind nature's fury sharpened his senses. Atlas stayed glued to his side, head high, tail still, amber eyes attentive. The dog's thick winter coat bristled every time the wind howled, but he remained collected, a soldier in his own right. Where Ethan moved with caution, Atlas moved with certainty. In the house, Lily Parker tucked an extra wool blanket at the foot of Margaret Cole's bed. The older woman leaned back against her pillow, her narrow shoulders sinking into the mattress, breath whisper soft, but her gaze, pale blue and slightly unfocused, held a fragile determination. "You've done enough for today," Margaret murmured. "Sit, rest." Lily offered a small, tired smile. "I'm all right, just making sure everything is ready." Her voice was calm, but inside her chest fluttered a faint anxiety she couldn't quite name. the storm outside didn't only remind her of the night she almost died. It sharpened the memory of the dark pickup truck watching from the tree line, the lingering presence that hadn't disappeared. Hours passed. The storm grew louder. Lily sat near the fireplace with a book open in her lap, though she barely read a single line. Ethan had gone to double-check the livestock. Margaret dozed in the rocking chair wrapped in a crocheted shawl. The clock ticked in slow, steady beats, the sound oddly fragile beneath the storm's roar. Then the lights flickered, once, twice, and went out. The entire house plunged into shadow. The hum of the generator sputtered once, then died in unnatural silence. Atlas lifted his head sharply. A low, warning growl rumbled deep in his chest. "Ethan?" Lily called, standing quickly. No answer. Margaret looked up with surprising clarity. "Lily, dear, this is no ordinary outage." Something cold slid down Lily's spine. She grabbed the flashlight on the mantel, her breath quickening. Atlas moved first. He stepped between Lily and the back hallway, muscles taut beneath his fur, ears pinned high. His growl deepened. Then, a sound. A faint scrape. Metal against metal, a deliberate tug on a latch, from the direction of the mudroom. "Take the shotgun," Margaret whispered, her usually trembling voice steady with decades of unspoken resilience. "Top of the wall rack, safety on the left." Lily's hands trembled as she reached up. The wood was cold beneath her fingers, but the weight of the shotgun grounded her. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like her ribs would crack. Atlas barked once, sharp, urgent. The back door latch snapped, glass shattered, footsteps stumbled in. Two men pushed through the broken frame, silhouettes swallowed in black coats, hoods dripping snow. One was tall with a thick build, heavy boots stomping across the floor. The other was leaner, moving with a jittery impatience that hinted at nerves stretched too thin. Even in the dim flashlight beam, Lily could see their faces enough to freeze her blood. The lean one smiled a crooked, hateful smile, revealing a split lip and uneven stubble. His gray eyes gleamed with recognition. "Well, well," he drawled. "Our missing little waitress." Lily's throat constricted. Atlas launched forward. He slammed into the lean intruder with the force of a battering ram, teeth sinking into the man's forearm, dragging him down. The man screamed, his weapon clattering across the tile. The larger intruder cursed and lunged toward Lily. She raised the shotgun, her grip unsteady but determined. Her voice trembled. "Stop right there!" He paused, hands half raised, not in surrender, but in cruel amusement. "You won't shoot." Margaret spoke from behind Lily, tone low and piercing. "Try her." The moment stretched thin. Then a movement flashed at the back doorway. A dark silhouette stepped inside, silent as a shadow. Ethan. He moved with trained precision, cutting across the intruder's blind angle. His vest was dusted with snow, his jaw clenched tight as steel. With a swift pivot, he locked the man's arm and drove him to the floor. The intruder hit the ground with a heavy thud, breath knocked out of him. "Lily, stay back!" Ethan barked. Atlas growled over the pinned man beneath him, holding him without hesitation. Within minutes, the fight was over. Both intruders were tied with thick barn rope, wrists secured behind their backs. Their curses were muted by the storm as the wind pushed against the broken door. The house, though battered, felt strangely still. Lily stood trembling, shotgun still in her hands. The realization of what almost happened crashed over her in aching waves. Ethan stepped toward her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. His touch was warm, grounding. "You did good," he said softly. "You did real good." Atlas circled between them, his breathing heavy but his tail giving a slow, reassuring sweep. Margaret let out a shaky exhale. "We're safe, for now." And so, with the storm still raging outside, the four of them stood together, shaken, exhausted but unbroken. They had survived their first true trial as a makeshift family. Spring on the melting white fields. The last breath of winter clung to the hills in fading streaks, but the worst of the cold had loosened its grip. The snowbanks shrank a little more each day, sending thin rivulets of meltwater sliding across the ranch yard. The wind no longer howled like a wounded animal. Instead, it carried the gentler scent of thawing earth. Birds began to return, tentative at first, then in small, confident bursts of song. Inside the house, sunlight stretched through the kitchen windows in golden strips. Lily Parker paused to watch the dust motes drifting in the warm light, a sight so different from the bitter storm that had once nearly taken her life. She still rose sometimes with a start, the echo of breaking glass or the shadow of the dark truck lingering in her memory, but each morning brought more stability than fear. The police investigation had unfolded quickly after the intruders were taken into custody. Officers from Cody, led by Deputy Laura McKinney, a tall woman in her early 30s with neat blonde hair, sun-spotted skin, and an expression that balanced rural warmth with firm authority, had coordinated with Denver detectives. Laura had a calm, measured way of speaking, the kind shaped by years of diffusing disputes among ranch families and reckless tourists. When she listened to Lily's statement, she took notes with measured strokes, nodding without judgment, her blue-gray eyes sharp with understanding. Within a week, the trail led straight to the former hotel manager, Greg Marin, a man in his mid-40s with thick dark eyebrows, heavy jowls, and a temper that rose quicker than his conscience. He had built a career on intimidation, masked as authority. Other victims, once afraid to speak, stepped forward after hearing what happened at the ranch. A pattern emerged. His downfall was swift. Lily was no longer just an anonymous waitress who vanished from Denver. She became the witness who shone light onto years of silence. And though her voice still trembled sometimes, it never wavered. Ethan noticed. He watched her from the porch some mornings as she hung laundry while talking softly to Atlas. The German shepherd trotted beside her, now more companion than wary observer. His black and tan coat gleamed in the sun, and his ears perked whenever Lily laughed, as if he were catching joy mid-air. Margaret Cole, frail but spirited, warmed to spring as if it brought back an older version of herself. She moved easier in the sun, her pale skin no longer ghost-like in the stormlight. On especially good days, she insisted on sweeping the front steps or pruning the small scrub roses she loved. Lily stayed close when she did, gently redirecting her when her memory slipped. Margaret's gratitude came in soft smiles and gentle squeezes of Lily's hand. Life began to reshape itself. Ethan cleared out a spare storage room with Lily's help. They moved boxes, dusted shelves, and carried old tools to the barn. Slowly, the space transformed into a small classroom. Shelves for notebooks, a chalkboard Ethan rescued from the closed-down elementary school, and a long wooden table that smelled faintly of pine. Soon, children from remote families began visiting once a week. 2 siblings with freckles as bright as their red hair, a quiet boy with wide brown eyes and mismatched gloves, a girl with thick braids and a shy smile. Lily taught them letters, numbers, and stories. In return, they brought laughter back to the house. Atlas, to everyone's amusement, considered himself the classroom assistant. He lay near the door with perfect posture, ears pointed forward as if grading the children's recitations. They adored him. He tolerated their affection with noble patience, occasionally nudging a dropped pencil back toward the table, and Ethan watched the transformation with a quiet, growing pride. He found himself lingering in the doorway of the classroom some afternoons, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed, his dark hair ruffled by the wind coming through the open window. There was a softness in his eyes that hadn't been there before, one that carved out space where old grief used to sit. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the melting fields in shades of honey gold, the two of them stood in the yard. The grass was patchy but vibrant where it broke through the shrinking snow. Atlas sniffed at a patch of earth near the barn. Margaret rested on a rocking chair wrapped in a knitted blanket, her silver hair glowing in the dusk. Ethan spoke first. "I didn't know how much this place needed you," he said, voice steady but quieter than usual. "I thought I was only looking for someone to help with my mother, and you did that, more than I could ask for." Lily looked down at her hands, the same hands that once trembled as she guarded Margaret during the attack. Now they were steady. "But you've brought more than help," Ethan continued. "You brought life back into this house, into all of us." Lily lifted her gaze. She saw the truth in his expression, the vulnerability behind the rugged calm, the sincerity behind the few words he allowed himself. It made something warm stir in her chest. "I didn't think I'd ever belong anywhere again," she said softly. "But here, I feel like I do." Atlas wandered over, nudging Lily gently with his nose, then looking up at Ethan as if urging him onward. Ethan stepped closer. "I'd like this place to be your home, not because you need somewhere to stay, but because," his voice faltered for the first time, "because I want you here, with us." The words fell into the quiet evening like a promise. Lily exhaled slowly. It felt like letting go of the last remnants of winter inside her. She nodded, small at first, then certain. Margaret watched from the porch, a soft smile on her lined face. Atlas settled at her feet, eyes half closed but ears still alert as the last light faded. The yard held the prints of a new beginning, boot tracks and paw marks crossing the thawing earth, leading toward warmth, safety, and a future no longer shadowed by fear. In the quiet glow of spring, when the last snow finally gave way to soft earth and warmer skies, Lily's story reminded us of something many forget in the rush of everyday life. Miracles rarely arrive with thunder or bright lights. More often, they come quietly, through a stranger's open door, a loyal dog's watchful eyes, or the steady hands of someone who refuses to give up on goodness. Some say it is luck, others say fate, but those who have lived long enough know the truth. When the world feels cold and people seem distant, God sends help in ways we do not expect. Not with grand signs, but through ordinary hearts willing to care. A retired Navy SEAL doing his best to protect his mother, a young woman fighting to rebuild her life, a German shepherd standing guard through storm and darkness. Small pieces woven together by a hand far greater than any of us can see. And in that weaving, a new home was formed, a family was found, a life was restored. As you close this story, may it remind you to look gently at the people around you, to notice the quiet struggles, the silent bravery, and the goodness that still lives in everyday places. Because sometimes, the miracle is not what happens to us, but what God awakens within us. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to share it with someone who might need a little hope today. Leave a comment below, tell us where you're watching from, and let us know how God has shown up in your own life, whether through a friend, a stranger, or a moment you still can't explain. And if you'd like more stories that warm the spirit and remind us of His quiet grace, remember to like, share, and subscribe. May God bless you, keep you safe, and guide you gently through the storms of your life, just as He guided Lily home.